The emergency summit was classified. No cameras allowed. Phones confiscated at the door. But one recording device got through, and it captured Ibrahim Traoré delivering the most explosive speech in modern African political history. When it went viral, governments panicked, and millions celebrated. November 8, 2025. Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. The African Union headquarters stood imposing against the evening sky, its modern architecture a symbol of continental unity and ambition. Inside the main conference hall, an emergency closed-door summit was underway. 54 African heads of state and their senior advisors had gathered for what the official schedule called a strategic consultation on regional security and economic cooperation. But everyone in that room knew the real agenda. Pressure from external powers, specifically France, the United States, and China, had reached a breaking point. All three were demanding African leaders choose sides in escalating global tensions. France wanted continued military presence and resource access. The U.S. wanted strategic alignment and voting support in international bodies. China wanted infrastructure deals and mineral rights. And each power was using a combination of financial incentives and subtle threats to get compliance. The meeting was strictly confidential. No media coverage, no official minutes. Security protocols were extreme. Phones and recording devices were collected at the door, stored in signal-blocking pouches, and only returned when participants left. The goal was to allow honest discussion without fear of leaks or diplomatic fallout. What nobody knew was that one recording device had made it through. A senior aide to a West African delegation had a specialized pen, a gift from an intelligence contact, that contained a microphone so sophisticated it bypassed standard detection. He activated it as the session began and placed it on the table in front of him. The first 2 hours of the summit followed predictable patterns. Leaders spoke in careful diplomatic language. They acknowledged complex challenges and competing interests. They proposed balanced approaches and constructive engagement. Nobody said what they really meant. Nobody challenged the fundamental premise that Africa had to choose masters. It was political theater, frustrating but safe. Then Ibrahim Traoré raised his hand. The room fell quiet. Traoré had arrived late, coming directly from Burkina Faso after dealing with an attempted sabotage at a state facility. He was wearing his military uniform, the red beret that had become his signature. His expression was calm, but those who knew him recognized the tension in his jaw. He was angry, and unlike the others, he had no intention of hiding it. The summit chair, the current AU rotating president, nodded. "President Traoré, you have the floor." Traoré stood. He didn't use notes. He looked directly at his fellow leaders, making eye contact around the room. And when he spoke, his voice was quiet at first, almost conversational. But the words cut like a blade. "I've been listening for 2 hours," he began, "and I've heard many words. Strategy, cooperation, partnership, balance. All very diplomatic, very polite. But I haven't heard anyone say what we're actually discussing here." He paused. "We're discussing which foreign power we should obey. That's what this meeting is really about, and I'm here to tell you, I will not obey any of them." The room tensed immediately. A few leaders shifted uncomfortably. Others exchanged glances. But Traoré continued, his voice gaining strength. "France has military bases in 14 African countries. They claim it's for our security. But whose security? When terrorists attack civilians, where are these French soldiers? They're protecting French mining operations. They're securing French corporate interests. They're not here for us. They're here for them. And yet we sit in meetings like this one, debating how to maintain good relations with France, as if they're doing us a favor by occupying our land. A French-aligned leader tried to interrupt. "President Traoré, that's an oversimplification." But Traoré cut him off with a raised hand. "No, it's the truth. And if we can't speak truth in a closed room with no cameras, then we're not leaders. We're performers." He turned to another section of the room. "And China. They offer infrastructure loans. Roads, railways, ports. All very generous. Until you read the contracts, until you realize the debt terms, until you see that the projects employ Chinese workers, use Chinese materials, and when we can't pay, they take control of the infrastructure they built. This isn't partnership, it's economic colonization with better branding." More uncomfortable shifting. But nobody challenged him directly, because deep down, many of them knew he was right. Traoré's voice grew harder. "And the United States. They lecture us about democracy and human rights while supporting dictators who serve their interests. They demand we vote with them at the UN, align with their foreign policy, open our markets to their corporations, and in exchange, they give us aid that comes with conditions, aid that benefits their companies, aid that keeps us dependent." He walked to the center of the room, standing where everyone could see him. "So here we are, 54 African nations, 1 billion people, vast natural resources, young populations, growing economies, and we're sitting in this room trying to decide which master is the kindest, which chain is the lightest, which cage has the nicest paint." His voice rose. "This is insane. We are not children who need guardians. We are not provinces of foreign empires. We are sovereign nations, and it's time we started acting like it." The summit chair tried to restore order. "President Traoré, I understand your passion, but perhaps we should—" Again, Traoré didn't let him finish. "Perhaps we should what? Be diplomatic? Be patient? How many more decades should we wait? How many more generations should grow up in nations that are rich in resources but poor in development because we keep making deals that benefit everyone except our own people?" He turned to address the entire assembly. "I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, Traoré is being reckless. He doesn't understand the complexity. We need these relationships. We can't afford to stand alone." And you're right about one thing. We can't stand alone. But the solution isn't to submit to external powers. The solution is to stand together. 54 nations, one continent, one unified stance. He pointed at the AU emblem on the wall. "We created this union for a reason, not to be a talking shop, not to rubber stamp decisions made in Washington, Paris, or Beijing. We created it to represent African interests. So why don't we use it? Why don't we present a united front? Why don't we tell France, withdraw your military or face continental sanctions? Why don't we tell China, renegotiate these debt traps or lose access to African markets? Why don't we tell the US, treat us as equals or we'll build our own alliances?" A leader from a country heavily dependent on Western aid spoke up nervously. "President Traoré, that sounds powerful, but the economic consequences," Traoré nodded, "would be severe, initially, but temporary. Yes, we'd face sanctions. Yes, we'd lose aid. Yes, we'd face isolation. But we'd also force them to realize something they've been denying. They need us more than we need them." He elaborated, his voice now measured and strategic. "Europe's economy depends on African resources. Their renewable energy transition requires minerals we control. China's Belt and Road Initiative needs African markets and trade routes. The US wants African votes at the UN and bases for their military operations. They need us, but they've convinced us that we need them more. That's the lie we keep believing." Traoré walked back to his seat, but remained standing. "I'm not saying we cut all ties. I'm saying we renegotiate from a position of strength instead of weakness. I'm saying we trade on our terms, not theirs. I'm saying we stop accepting crumbs and start demanding our fair share. And I'm saying we do it together. Because divided, they can pick us off one by one. United, we're unstoppable. The room was silent. Some leaders looked inspired, others looked terrified, a few looked angry. But nobody could deny the power of what they'd just heard. One elder statesman, a leader who had been in power for over 30 years and had always played the diplomatic game, stood slowly. President Traore, what you're proposing is revolutionary. It would fundamentally alter Africa's relationship with the world. Are you truly prepared for the consequences? Traore met his gaze. The question isn't whether I'm prepared. The question is whether we're prepared to keep living with the current consequences. Poverty while we sit on wealth. Dependency while we have resources. Weakness while we have numbers. I'm tired of those consequences. And I think our people are too. The meeting continued for another hour, but the energy had shifted. Traore's speech had broken something open, a conversation that had been suppressed for too long. Some leaders began speaking more honestly. Others remained defensive, but nobody could ignore what had been said. When the summit ended, phones were returned. Participants left quietly, knowing that what had been discussed would never be officially recorded. The meeting had been off the record, confidential, safe, except it wasn't. 48 hours later, on November 10th at 9 p.m., an audio file appeared on social media. 7 minutes and 32 seconds. Poor quality, background noise. But the voice was unmistakable. Ibrahim Traoré's entire speech, recorded and leaked. Within an hour, it had been shared 100,000 times. Within 6 hours, it was trending globally. And within 24 hours, it had over 50 million views across platforms. The reaction was explosive. In African cities, young people played the audio in public squares. University students organized rallies, chanting quotes from the speech. Pan-African organizations hailed it as a defining moment. The hashtag #Traoré told the truth became the top trend worldwide. But the backlash was equally fierce. French media called Traoré dangerous and destabilizing. Western think tanks published op-eds warning about African populism and anti-democratic rhetoric. And behind closed doors, diplomatic pressure on African governments intensified. Several leaders who had been in that room publicly distanced themselves from Traoré's comments, calling them unhelpful or taken out of context. Traoré himself responded in a televised address 3 days after the leak. "A private conversation has become public," he said. "I don't know who recorded it or why they leaked it. But I stand by every word, because what I said in that closed room is what I would say in any room, at any time, to anyone. Africa deserves dignity. Africa deserves sovereignty. And Africa deserves leaders who will fight for those things instead of negotiating them away." The leaked recording became more than a viral moment. It became a rallying cry. Opposition movements in several African countries used it to challenge their governments. Citizens demanded their leaders take stronger stances. And a new generation of activists and politicians emerged, inspired by Traoré's willingness to speak uncomfortable truths. 6 months later, at the next African Union Summit, this one public and televised, 12 African nations jointly proposed a resolution for continental economic integration and a unified negotiating position with foreign powers. It wasn't everything Traoré had called for, but it was a start, and it wouldn't have happened without that leaked recording. Years later, a journalist asked Traoré if he regretted being so blunt in a private meeting. He smiled. "I regret that it was private. Those words should have been said publicly from the beginning. Someone leaking that recording did us all a favor, because the truth doesn't need to hide behind closed doors. It belongs in the open, where people can hear it, debate it, and decide for themselves. The recording that was never supposed to exist had changed the conversation. And sometimes, that's all it takes to change the world.